Now it's time for the morning weather report with Angelica and Anna.
Hi, it's Angelica with your morning weather report. Today it looks like there's going to be a hurricane that will occur mostly in Florida. A few hours ago, I said there's going to be a hurricane mostly in Florida today. But I just got a report saying that there's a massive hurricane hitting 7 states, but mainly in Louisiana. They are calling it Hurricane Katrina. Now that the hurricane is over, let's go to an interview of someone who was helping during the hurricane.
I did have a place to go for the storm. Usually it was wherever the National Guard sent me, but for the few years prior to Hurricane Katrina, our unit went into the Superdome. We're a medical unit, and so we went in there because it was a large storm shelter, and we went in there to support any medical needs. And so I pretty much knew I was going there. The first day that they called us up was a Saturday, and we went into our National Guard unit, and fortunately, my daughter was already gone by that time. Fortunately, that night, my unit told us to go home, and if we had anything else to do, go ahead and take care of it, and come back in the morning, and then we'd go to the Superdome. So did that, and was able to spend one last night in my house, and then the next day we went to the Superdome, which was a Sunday night, and the storm hit Monday morning. So as I mentioned before, I was in a medical unit. I worked, my technical position was I was a medic, but because I was one of the senior sergeants, my role was primarily, I guess, like a supervisor. So what did I do? I made sure things happened. If we needed medics to go down to the ground level of the Superdome for some reason, I got the medics there. I found them, I got them there. If we needed food delivered to us, I went and tracked down the company that handled getting food to the area, our MREs. I organized things. I guess that would be the best way to describe my job. And then, like everybody else, I grabbed a lot of cots for a lot of people. We had quite a few elderly patients from nursing homes that were with us, and so there's a lot of nighttime delirium being in a strange place. They didn't know where they were, and so just kind of trying to find like quieting people down, like calming them down, because they were kind of worried about why you were in their house in the middle of the night, and even though you weren't. And so, just trying to calm them down and get them a place to sleep, and maybe grab an MRE and open it for someone who couldn't, from their arthritis, they couldn't even open an MRE, which are not all that easy to open. So I was a little surprised when I first found out that Hurricane Katrina was coming to Louisiana, because all of the newscasters said it was going to Florida. And so, living in Louisiana, we pretty much kept on top of the news until we saw a hurricane was going a different direction. And then we kind of ignored it. But I got a call on a Friday night from my mother, who asked me what my plan was for the hurricane. And so I turned on the TV and went to the Weather Channel and was very surprised to find out it was headed straight for New Orleans.
Facts about Hurricane Katrina's destruction.
About 90,000 square miles were impacted by Hurricane Katrina, and an estimated 80% of New Orleans was underwater, with some places up to 20 feet deep. Katrina was the largest and third strongest hurricane ever recorded to make landfall in the U.S. In New Orleans, the levees were designed for Category 3, but Katrina peaked at a Category 5 hurricane with winds up to 175 miles per hour. The first water that flowed into New Orleans was clean ocean water, but it soon became black as there was now sewage and dead bodies. People would also develop rashes from standing in the water, but there was also a lot of other hazards after the hurricane had passed through. Exposed gas lines and electric lines caused explosions and fires. The Louisiana Superdome had become the biggest storm shelter in New Orleans. About 16,000 people were sheltered there, but within 2 days it had turned into an unspeakable horror. Tiffany Smith said, "We pee on the floor, we are like animals," as she cradled her 3-week-old son. The Superdome roof was also damaged, and it was sheltering over 10,000 people. According to FEMA, Katrina was the single most catastrophic natural disaster in U.S. history. There was an estimate of $108 billion, which would make it the costliest hurricane in U.S. history. There was 2 fatalities in Alabama, 14 in Florida, 2 in Georgia, 1,035 in Louisiana, 224 in Mississippi, which is a total of 1,277 fatalities, directly or indirectly. Hurricane Katrina affected New Orleans' economy. New Orleans is known for being one of the most visited cities in the United States. When Hurricane Katrina hit, it didn't only destroy homes, but it also destroyed most of the industries that supported a major part of the economy. After the storm had passed, there was basically no resources coming in or out of New Orleans, which caused a shortage of petroleum that was being exported out of New Orleans, which also caused gas prices to go up in the entire southeast of the United States. Something that makes Katrina unique is that not only was it a local disaster, but it also hurt the energy infrastructure of the country, as well as shutting down one of the country's main ports. 92% of the oil production was shut down for weeks after the storm. This, however, was not the only problem. New Orleans alone had a job loss of 95,000 for the first 10 months after the hurricane. The part that was hit the hardest was tourism. This part had about 22,900 lost jobs and $382.7 million in lost wages alone. Even though New Orleans' employment rate was hurt really badly, the country as a whole was not affected. Prices for resources were affected equally, however, throughout the whole country. Another thing is that 2 rural hospitals' recovery of power had been delayed due to the fact that the office of Vice President Dick Cheney had called a Mississippi Electricity Cooperative to restore power to a pipeline that was sending oil and gas to the Northeast. Engineers at the University of California at Berkeley said in a 2006 investigation that part of New Orleans' levees were eroding when Hurricane Katrina came. Due to unstable soils, the levees were about 2 feet below the levels they were originally supposed to be at. Since then, the levees have been replaced and improved with T and L-shaped walls instead of I-shaped walls, and have steel support beams that extend to about 65 feet. The residents of New Orleans' evacuation access has improved greatly. For example, they now have email and text message system called NOLA Ready that sends them alerts of when they should evacuate, and 13,000 plus residents have signed up for it. President George Bush was criticized very harshly due to the fact that he was having a very slow response to getting relief efforts to New Orleans. The government did, however, install multiple rescue operations. Acknowledging all the people that had evacuated and the people that died in the hurricane, President Bush had asked Congress to support recovery aid needs. Congress then granted these requests and enacted 2 supplementary appropriation bills totaling $62.3 billion for emergency response and recovery needs. Bush had also promised $2,000 immediately for evacuees that were living in a number of different temporary homes. The Stafford Act was also not waived by the federal government, which requires localities to contribute 10% for cleanup projects and reconstruction until May, compared to September 11th and Hurricane Andrew, where it was waived fairly quickly. Even though the Bush administration was getting most of the blame, New Orleans Mayor Ray Nagin was being singled out in an investigation by congressional Republicans for not having an evacuation for the city until less than 24 hours before Katrina had hit the city. Also, before the storm had hit, Amtrak offered spots that could carry several hundred evacuees, but officials had declined, so the train had left without any passengers on it. Another thing is that Bill Richardson, who was then the governor of New Mexico, had offered 200 members of his state's National Guard to try and help Louisiana the day that Katrina had hit. But the letter authorizing it didn't come from Washington until about 5 days later. Other cities had hundreds of volunteer firefighters that were heading to New Orleans but were rerouted to Atlanta, where they were given 2 days' worth of presentations on sexual harassment and the history of FEMA before they could go.
That's it for today. Have a great rest of your day, and thanks for watching.